He thought she had built a successful life, until he found her working security on a cold night. What he did next left everyone stunned. The city skyline gleamed as Nathan Carter, billionaire CEO of Carter Enterprises, stepped out of his luxury car. Tonight, he was attending a high-profile charity gala at one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. Wealth, power, and success surrounded him everywhere he went. But as he approached the entrance, something caught his eye. A security guard standing near the door. Not just any guard. Claire Lawson. His heart stopped. She was wearing a standard black security uniform, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. There were faint, dark circles under her eyes, and exhaustion lined her face. But it was her. His best friend from high school. The girl who once dreamed of becoming a lawyer. The one who had beaten him in every debate competition. And now? She was here, working security. Nathan's chest tightened. How had this happened? As he stared, Claire finally looked up, and the moment her eyes met his, she froze. Shock, embarrassment, a flicker of something else, something she quickly masked. She straightened her posture, as if she hadn't just been caught completely off guard. "Nathan Carter," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Didn't think I'd see you here." Nathan's brows furrowed. "Claire, oh, what are you doing here?" She forced a small, indifferent smile. "My job." His stomach twisted. This wasn't right. This wasn't where Claire was supposed to be. And in that moment, he made a decision. He wasn't going to let her stay here. Because if life had knocked Claire down, then he was about to pull her back up. The next day, Nathan couldn't get Claire out of his mind. How did one of the smartest people he knew end up working security? So he made a call. Get me everything on Claire Lawson, her education, work history, everything that happened after high school. His assistant hesitated. "Sir, may I ask why?" Nathan's voice was firm. "Because she shouldn't be where I found her last night." A few hours later, a detailed report landed on his desk. As he read through it, his jaw tightened. Claire had been on track to become an attorney. She had gotten into law school, passed her first year with top grades. But then, tragedy struck. Her mother fell ill. Medical bills piled up. Claire had to drop out to take care of her. And when her mother passed, she never went back. Instead, she took whatever job she could find to survive. Security work paid the bills. But it wasn't her dream. Nathan clenched his fists. This wasn't fair. Claire had worked harder than anyone he knew. She was meant to argue in courtrooms, not guard event halls. And if no one else was going to fix this, he would. That evening, Claire had just finished her shift when she heard a voice behind her. "We need to talk." She turned. And there was Nathan, standing beside his luxury car, looking at her like he had already made up his mind. Claire sighed. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" He held up a folder. "I know everything." Her stomach dropped. "Everything. Law school, your mom, why you had to drop out." His voice softened. "Why you're here instead of in a courtroom." Claire looked away. "It doesn't matter. That part of my life is over." Nathan took a step closer. "No, it's not." She frowned. "Nathan." He cut her off, holding out the folder. "I paid off your law school debt." Claire's breath hitched. "You... what?" "And I got you a spot at one of the best firms in the city." His voice was steady, unwavering. "You start next week." Claire's hands shook as she stared at the papers inside. It was all real. A second chance. A future she thought she had lost forever. Her throat tightened. "Nathan, I can't let you do this." He smirked. "Too late. It's done." Claire laughed through her tears. "You always were impossible." Nathan chuckled. And you were always meant for more than this. She exhaled, looking up at him with new determination. This wasn't charity. This was her comeback. And as she took the folder, shaking her head in disbelief, one thing was certain. Nathan Carter had just changed her life forever. 1 year later. Claire adjusted the sleeves of her crisp designer blazer as she stood in front of the massive glass windows of Carter Enterprises headquarters. She still couldn't believe it. 1 year ago, she was working security. Now, she was one of the top junior attorneys at one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. And today, she was here for a meeting with Nathan Carter himself, the billionaire who had pulled her back onto the path she was always meant to be on, the man who changed everything. Taking a deep breath, she knocked on his office door. "Come in." She stepped inside, and there he was, Nathan Carter, seated at his sleek mahogany desk, looking as powerful and confident as ever. But when he looked up and saw her, his expression shifted into something softer. "Claire Lawson," he said with a smirk. "Look at you, a full-fledged attorney now." She grinned, stepping closer. "Told you I wouldn't waste your investment." Nathan chuckled. "I never had any doubts." She placed a folder on his desk. "Your company has officially retained my firm, which means, Nathan, I'm your legal counsel now." His eyebrow lifted. "So, you're my lawyer?" Claire folded her arms, smirking. "That's right, which means you have to listen to me now." Nathan leaned forward slightly, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "I think we both know that's never going to happen." She laughed, shaking her head. Same old Nathan. But there was something different between them now. A closeness. A connection neither of them had acknowledged yet. Nathan tapped the folder on his desk. "You ready for this, Lawson?" Claire held his gaze. "I was born ready, Carter." As they shook hands, a firm grip, full of unspoken promises, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a professional reunion. This was the beginning of something much more. 2 years later, the grand ballroom of Carter Enterprises' annual gala was packed with the city's most powerful executives, politicians, and business leaders. It was the event of the year, and at the center of it all, Nathan Carter and Claire Lawson. Claire stood by the bar, sipping her champagne, watching as Nathan worked the room with effortless charm. He was still the same bold, confident man, but tonight something was different, because he wasn't just the billionaire CEO anymore. He was her partner, in business, in life, in everything. Nathan eventually broke away from a group of executives and made his way to her, smirking. "Hiding from me, Lawson?" She chuckled, shaking her head. "Just enjoying the show, Carter." He slid his hands into his pockets, studying her for a moment. "You know, 2 years ago, I walked into a gala just like this, and found you standing outside as a security guard." Claire raised an eyebrow. "And look at me now." Nathan leaned in slightly, his voice lower. "Yeah, look at you now." A warmth spread through her chest. It had been a whirlwind, her career taking off, winning cases, standing beside Nathan not as someone he saved, but as someone who matched him. And now, there was something unspoken between them, a shift, a moment waiting to happen. Nathan set his champagne down and took her hand. "Come with me." She blinked. "Where?" He smirked. "Just trust me." He led her through the ballroom and out onto the balcony, where the city skyline stretched endlessly before them. The cold air brushed against her skin, but Nathan's presence was warm. For the first time all night, it was just them. Nathan turned to her, his usual playful smirk fading into something more serious. "Claire, have you ever thought about what would have happened if I hadn't found you that night?" She swallowed, her heart pounding. "All the time." He nodded. "Me too. And I realize now, I don't want to imagine a life where you're not in it. Claire's breath hitched. Nathan. He took a step closer. We've built something incredible together. You challenge me, you make me better, and I don't want to spend another day pretending that this, he gestured between them, is just business. Her chest tightened. She had felt it too, for so long. Nathan exhaled, his voice softer now. So what do you say, Lawson? He smirked. Are you finally ready to admit we make a great team? Claire laughed softly, shaking her head. Nathan Carter, you are impossible. Then, before she could overthink it, she grabbed his tie and kissed him. Nathan didn't hesitate. He kissed her back, deep and certain, like this was always meant to happen. And in that moment, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a second chance at success. This was a second chance at love. And neither of them were letting go, 5 years later. The sun set beautifully over the city skyline as guests gathered at the rooftop terrace of Carter Enterprises. The evening wasn't just another corporate event. It was a celebration. Nathan Carter and Claire Lawson had built an empire together. She was no longer just his legal counsel. She was his equal. A powerhouse attorney, a board member, and one of the most influential names in the business world. But tonight was about something much bigger. As the night carried on, Nathan tapped his champagne glass, drawing the attention of the crowd. A hush fell over the guests. Claire, standing beside him, gave him a curious look. Nathan, what are you up to? He smirked. You'll see. Taking a deep breath, he looked out at the crowd. 5 years ago, I found Claire working security at a gala just like this one. Soft murmurs of recognition filled the space. Many of the guests knew the story, but they had no idea where this was going. Nathan turned to Claire, his voice softer now. That night, I thought I was giving her a second chance. But the truth is, she gave me one too. Claire's breath hitched, her chest tightening. She wasn't just someone from my past. She became my future. His gaze held hers, filled with something deep, something undeniable. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The crowd gasped. Claire's hands flew to her mouth. Nathan! He got down on one knee. Claire Lawson, you've always been the smartest, most stubborn, most incredible woman I've ever met. You stood by me, challenged me, and built something with me that I never knew I needed. So now, let's make it official. He opened the box, a stunning diamond ring catching the city lights. Marry me. Claire felt her heart nearly stop. Everything they had been through, all the battles, all the victories, had led to this moment. Tears welled in her eyes as she smiled, her answer coming instantly. Yes. The crowd erupted into applause as Nathan slid the ring onto her finger before standing and pulling her into a deep, breathtaking kiss. The past was behind them. Their future had just begun. And as they held each other, looking out over the city they had built their lives in, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a love story. This was a legacy.